Morning. Hello, and welcome to our fourth webinar of the series on play. My name is Beck, and I am the lead of the professional learning and development here at Raising Literacy Australia. Hello to Abby. She's sitting alongside me today, who is the Words Grow Minds program officer, and she's monitoring the chat and she's working alongside me with any of the techie type and pieces that the webinar will require this morning. A friendly reminder that we will be recording today's session, and this is going to be shared on our socials and the wider network. So please be mindful of your audio and any backgrounds that you have, just because they can then obviously be recorded and translated later on. So a big welcome to you all. I think what's so truly special about Words Grow Minds is how it's bringing us all together as a big collective group. And we're so thrilled to have with us today early years professionals, service providers, and even families from South Australia and even beyond who play such important roles in young children's lives. And we see this as a place for everyone to connect, a place to share knowledge and lived experience and to learn and discuss. And to do that, we have a chat box available. And on your Zoom options panel, there's a chat option which has two speech bubbles. And if you click on that, and it will come up and pop up on your screen, and you can drag that out and have that up available if you'd like to see what people are sharing and where people are coming from to join this webinar today. So that's going to be a really great way that we'll connect, but we'll speak to that. So you'll also be able to hear what's on the chat as well if you don't have that option presented on your screen at the moment. But it would be lovely to hear who's on the other side at the webinar today and joining us. So pop your name in the chat if you've got that up and ready to go, and say hello. Pop your name, pop your service, where you're from, and let's get the chat rolling and let's begin to connect. We are so fortunate to have two key presenters and experts in play join us today. A very warm welcome to Renee Stewart. Renee is a developmental educator and play therapist working with children and families at her practice, Grow Pediatric Therapy in McLaren Vale. So hello, Renee. Give a little run away. Oh, there she is. Also, a very warm welcome to Jason Tindale, who's the Chief Executive Officer at Nature Play SA. Hi, Jason. I'm going to give some further information about each of our key speakers a little bit later in the webinar. But play is just such a crucial driver for learning and development in the early years. And we're going to take a deep dive into play, what it looks like from a developmental perspective, how we can scaffold play and encourage families to be playful and to play at home. And we'll also consider the current landscape for children's play and how unstructured play in nature benefits children's resilience, mental and physical health, and development. And we're going to go on a bit of a journey in relation to what it is and how we can be immersed in the amazing landscape of nature and what that provides for us. So there's a lot of exciting content to share with you this morning. And let's begin and let's take a deep dive into play. Firstly, we recognise and pay our respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, their ancestors, and the elders past, present, and future from the different First Nations across this country. We acknowledge the importance of connection to land, culture, spirituality, ancestry, family, and community for the well-being of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and their families. Raising Literacy Australia is positioned and delivering this webinar to you on Kaurna country, and we acknowledge that country that we are delivering this webinar to you on today. And it'd be nice to hear in the chat the land that you might be joining from today as well. So pop it in the chat. I can see that some people are already starting to do that. And what I can see already in the chat, it's just so lovely to see, the vastness and where we're all coming from today. So welcome aboard, and it's so nice to have you with us. Wrong way. Better go forward. All right. So just some general housekeeping here. Firstly, this session will run for approximately an hour and a half. If we do go over, which sometimes we do, unfortunately, we are recording, like I mentioned, and you can catch up on the recording if you have to log out after the session. So we will make sure that we share this recording to you. So that way, if you do have to pop out, you can come back in and catch up on anything that you miss out on. We will be monitoring the chat, and we're going to do our best to respond to any questions that you may have. And we're encouraging you to raise some questions and some thoughts in the chat as well. If we can't get to your question, just to the amount that might come through, we're going to collate them and we will share a response from the people that you were looking from, the answers from, and we'll save that, and we will also connect that with the recording and the slide deck that we'll share out. So you will get a chance, hopefully, for your question to be answered. Any direct inquiries or queries, though, can go direct to us at admin@raisingliteracy.org, and we can respond individually to you. There will be also another little piece of tech that we might test you on, and hopefully it doesn't create any type of fear with you all, but we are aware that there's that interactive element. It is just so important for us to be able to come together today with. So one of the ways we're going to do that in this session is we're going to use an annotate option. And in the left side of your screen, you'll see it kind of looks like a pen or a pencil, and there's an option that would be there, and it's T for text. If you haven't got it there, if you can't see it on your screen, that's okay. We've got the chat, and Abby alongside me here, she's going to annotate for you. So we've got backup. But if you have got that option, there is going to be a piece in Renee's presentation that's going to ask you to type and to pop, your responses on the screen. So have a look at that. And again, don't feel too worried if it's not there with your, side and what you're using today. Use the chat, and Abby will be that annotate person for you. As quoted in the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child, Article 31, children have the right to relax, play, and to join in a wide range of leisure activities. And as early childhood professionals and people who connect with young children and families, we are to advocate for this right to play, to curate a play-based learning routine and environment, and use thoughtful practices like following children's leads and interests, and work alongside children in play to support their skill development. The Royal Children's Hospital National Child Health Poll is a quarterly national survey, and the report titled Australian Families, How We Play presents findings from a national representative household survey, and it's been exclusively presented by the online research unit for the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne. And in this online survey, Australian parents were asked about their experience, knowledge, and beliefs about play in children and young people. And let's just take a look and reflect on these findings here up on the screen. So 1/5 of parents, 19%, believe play is fun, but not essential, with 1 in 8 parents, 12%, believing play is mostly a waste of time. About 1/5 of parents, 18%, think that babies don't know how to play. Less than half, 45% of Australian children play outside most days, and 80% of parents would like their children to spend more time outdoors. Keep thinking about that as I move on to the next slide. Some other pieces here. Time, safety concerns, and weather stop Australian children playing outdoors. 1/3 of parents, so 32%, say it's not good for play to involve risk. And almost 2 in 3 parents, 61%, often find playing with their child hard or boring. And most parents, 58%, are keen to learn more about how to play with their child. It's quite interesting, isn't it? In the chat, as you're looking at that data and this information that's collated, what does that mean for us? And what does that mean in our work with families? Pop your thoughts in the chat. And although most parents, 91%, say they enjoy playing with their child, 1/3, 36%, say that sometimes they don't know how to play with their child, and 1/2 are not confident that they could help their child to play. So the report states clearly that we need to invest and provide strategies and efforts to reach families with evidence-based information on the ranging benefits of play, and as well as some practical advice and support to help parents enable play for their children. It's the act of playing that can sometimes be the most challenging. And families are looking here from this data, they're looking for tips and strategies and advice around playing at home. So we hope this webinar today will be an added layer for your existing expertise and skills and experience and support you on the ground with your work with families. And to begin with that, I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Renee Stewart, who will offer a whole new perspective on play and offer some of the ways we can guide families. Renee Stewart is a developmental educator and play therapist working with children and families at her practice, Grow Pediatric Therapy in McLaren Vale. And she's passionate about the power of play and inclusion. Renee has been a strong advocate for children's play and their right to play through podcasts, interviews, and workshops. And recently, she contributed to the British Journal of Play Therapy, exploring the use of therapeutic play for children of incarcerated parents. And Renee is also the author of Sometimes Play, a children's book celebrating the many ways that children do play and showing that there is no wrong play or wrong way to play. Thank you for coming on in today, Renee, and over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. I just clicked that. Okay. We're off to a good start.
That's all right.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Beck and Abby and Words Grow Minds for putting this together and for the extremely catchy jingle that is in my head every single day. Like Beck said, my name is Renee. I'm a developmental educator and play therapist. I'm also coming to you today from Ghanaland. I'm an ADHDer, so I do have my timer, so I stay on track, and I've got my things to hold and to fidget with. I'm a play advocate. I'm a children's author, which still feels weird to say because that only happened earlier this year. Yeah, and also recently published my first journal article, like Beck said, so doing some research into play-based interventions for children of incarcerated parents, so children who might have a parent in jail or in prison. I'm passionate about play. I love talking about play. I am really going to try not to go over because I could talk all day. But yeah, we'll see how we go. Cool. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a background on play therapy. So the thing I get a lot is, oh, you just play all day. Like, what a cool job. You just get to play, which is, it does have very fun moments. But it's also a lot of hard work. So play therapy involves play as therapy rather than play in therapy. So play in therapy, you might see maybe speech pathologists or occupational therapists using play as part of their therapy to engage and to work towards those speech and OT goals. Whereas play therapy, the play is the therapy. So it's not we don't use play to get kids to come in and to open up and start talking. We don't use it as a reward. The play is the hard work of the therapy, and that is based on play being children's natural mode of communication. So there is a really lovely saying from Lawrence Cohen says, children don't say, I had a hard day at school today. Can we talk about it? Can I talk to you about it? They'll say, will you play with me? Kids aren't going to come to, most kids, some might. Kids might not always have that language to sit down and talk to us about what's bothering them or what they're struggling with. So play therapy meets children where they're at in their natural mode of communication, which is play. And it's the job of a qualified and registered play therapist to play with them, support their play, no matter how tricky. You know, sometimes play therapy is not always fun. For example, maybe a child has experienced some trauma there's a really good Bluey episode. I'm sure we'd probably have lots of Bluey fans in the house. There's an episode called Copycat where a bird passes away and Bluey wants to play out over and over again the death of this bird. And I'm assuming it was Bandit. I haven't watched it too much. Bandit wants to jump in and fix it. And, oh, the bird's not dead. It's okay. And Bluey says, no, the bird is dead. The bird, they need to play that out over and over again in order to make sense of their world. So just like, as adults, we might talk through a situation over and over again. I might call my friends and my sister and my partner and go over the same thing. Whereas kids, they will play out those themes over and over again in play until they make sense of what's happening in their world. So we can see here on the right all the amazing therapeutic powers of play. So it helps us with, like I said, access to the unconscious. So things that kids might struggle to express verbally. We've also got, self-expression. Oh, I'm so sorry. Those two are meant to be different. I just realized that they say the exact same thing. I'll have to shoot out an edit to Beck later. But we work a lot on self-regulation, problem solving, self-esteem, and just building that really strong therapeutic relationship. So this is a little bit of an example of, a bit of a fun example of what play therapy does or is.
Oh, hey, Andrew, how was school today?
Well, it was a very
We lost Andrew.
Sorry, guys.
frustrating day. Tommy was teasing me about my haircut, and that was embarrassing. As a way of coping with my embarrassment, I became angry. I'm ashamed to admit it, dear mother, but I could not resist striking Tommy with my fist. While this act of emotional release did offer a moment's respite from my embarrassment, the victory was short-lived. The next thing I knew, Tommy had immobilized me with a headlock and gave me what is referred to colloquially as a swirly.
This isn't how kids communicate, but they do communicate in other ways. Play is a child's first language. When a child plays, they express thoughts and feelings that would otherwise remain hidden. That's why play therapy can be a powerful tool for addressing a child's cognitive, behavioral, and emotional challenges. Licensed mental health practitioners use play therapy to help children process their experiences and develop more effective strategies for managing their world. To learn more about play therapy and registered play therapists, visit a4pt.org.
Oh.
I really just need a chocolate milk on the rocks and a long soak in the tub.
So that's Andrew. I love showing that video. The only thing I will say is that that is an American website, so don't jump onto that one, but Beck's got some great resources right at the end. The other thing I do like to say with that video is every now and then some kids might communicate like Andrew. Some neurodivergent kids are really hyperlexic. They've got lots and lots of words and they can explain their day like that. But Andrew is just a bit of a funny video to give some background into play therapy. So I don't want to click it again in case it does it twice.
I'm going to click it for you, Renee.
Thank you. I did click it. I don't want it to, there we go. I don't want to skip too far ahead. So just a bit of a background into play therapy before we jump into normative play. So normative play is, for lack of a better word, normal, typical play that you'd see every day on the playground, at school. It can look so many different ways. It can be by ourselves, it can be with others, it can be imaginative, it can be really quiet, or it can be huge. We'll get into all the different types of play. But yeah, just a bit of a background in play therapy before we move into normative play, and both very, very important types of play. Play therapy is just a bit more structured and it does focus on those specific therapeutic goals, so working through traumas or building skills through play. So now moving into normative play, so the kind of play that you might see at your early childhood service or at your library or within your school. So as early childhood educators or, wherever you're coming from today, people working with very young people in their lives, we see this play every day, and we know these benefits of play because we're observing them, especially the social, the conflict resolution and the problem solving that happens. Every day we see these benefits of play. So we're improving memory and attention span. We're watching the language development take off, the fine and gross motor skills, hand-eye, just play. Like I said, I could present forever on how play is just so important. And that's why, when we looked at those statistics at the start with 19% of parents thinking that play is not essential or 12% thinking it's a waste of time, it's, you want to scream these kind of things from the rooftop and say, like, it's so important. Yeah, which is why we're all here to kind of convey those benefits to parents and to people who work with children. My controversial opinion is that my favorite age is when they start doing that squabbling and conflict resolution. I love seeing the social, the things that they're making sense of. I love stepping back and seeing them solve those problems amongst themselves. It's really interesting to see those cogs turning. And play, it's so beneficial because it's a safe place to practice new skills. So it's not that serious, I hate when people say just play, but it's just play. Kids can try out new skills, they can take on new roles, and if things don't go the way that they planned, or if things go wrong, it's just play. It doesn't matter if I got it wrong because it's just play. It's a really safe place for kids to try out new things and take risks. And I know Jason's going to get into risks later, which is really exciting. Yeah, but keeping play very unserious is what gives it that power to be such a safe place. And Peter Gray has a really great quote that kind of captures what I was just rambling trying to say. So Peter Gray is an American psychology researcher and scholar. He is a big guy in the play world. So he says, perhaps play would be more respected if we called it something like self-motivated practice of life skills, but that would remove the lightheartedness from it and thereby reduce its effectiveness. So we are stuck with the paradox. We must accept play's triviality in order to realize its profundity. And I really, really love that quote because, like I said, play, it does so much and it's so important, but it is that way because it's so unserious. It's just play. So this is the part that Beck was speaking about earlier, where we'll ask you to hop on if you can. How would you define play? What might that look like? What are the things that you observe? Yeah, and it's a big question, and you start writing whenever I'm just going to keep talking. It is a huge question because a bit of a spoiler alert is that in the academic world of play, there's still conflict. There's still no consensus about what play looks like. We have a dictionary definition of play, but play is something so broad. Play could be playing a game of basketball where there's lines that you have to stay between and there's rules that you have to remember and positions and scores, or it can be rolling around in the mud. For one word to define something that is so broad and can look like so many things, it's really hard to find that definition. I can see a couple of things popping up.
Yeah.
Fun, enjoyment, enjoying what you're doing, driven by the child. Yeah, we'll touch on that in a moment. I can see in the chat self-motivated.
Yeah, pop things in the chat too if you're having troubles with the annotate.
I can see that some people might already know that the definition I'm about to go into. It's magic. Oh,
It's
I love
magic.
that one. Communication, yeah. Exploring, that's a really good one. Research, yes. It is research. We're learning those skills, and when things go wrong, we're still learning. Movement. Experimenting. Yeah, little scientists sometimes. Planning, yeah, plans and interests. Absolutely. So heaps of different, like I said, play is so broad that it's hard to pin it down in a few words. Many people have tried. I think everyone's just about done. Hopefully, I don't want to cut anyone off, but we'll
That's
go
all
into
right.
the
Might
next
just
slide.
articulate.
Communicating, yeah.
All right,
So
we'll get rid of those bits for you.
so like I said, it's hard to pin down just one definition. The one that I personally always find myself coming back to, and I think a few people might, going from people's responses, people might have seen this one before, but I always come back to Peter Gray's 5 conditions of play. So that is that play is self-chosen and self-directed. I saw one of those as the answer. It's intrinsically motivated, so the means are more valued than the ends. So the process of building the sandcastle is more important than having that sandcastle at the end. It's guided by mental rules, but it leaves room for creativity. So even if you might not hear those rules, but kids will have mental rules that they're following in their play. It's imaginative and it's conducted in an alert, active, but relatively non-stressed frame of mind. So you won't see kids playing stress. They're things like what's the time, Mr. Wolf? That is stressful. But it's still play. So these are, like I said, the 5 conditions that I often come back to. I think one of the really important ones is that it's self-chosen and self-directed. So as soon as we as adults come in with our own goals and outcomes for play, then it takes away from that. It's not play anymore. It's a task that we're wanting kids to do. So one of the things I love seeing in the early years are those play provocations or invitations to play, where they set up beautiful stations and things to do, which is fantastic, as long as you kind of have to let go of your plans for that station. You might set up a beautiful fruit market and think, everyone's going to come in and they're going to play shopkeepers, and it might turn into a spaceship. And that's okay. That's what they've seen it as. But as soon as we have our own goals for play, then that kind of takes away from it a little bit. And it is hard. I know in the early years, there's lots of, you're trying to align to standards and trying to show and prove learning, which can conflict sometimes with just letting kids lead the way. But play in the early years. So another statistic from the start that Beck presented to us that I found really interesting was that 1/5 of people or parents, 18% think that babies don't know how to play, which is really interesting because babies, they do know how to play. It just looks very different in those early years. They have a very different way of playing in the early years. In the early years, it's learning, it's discovery, it's very sensory, and it's very social. So in those early years, just being face to face with each other and spending time together, that's play. Babies want to look at your face and to hear the words coming out of your mouth. It's very sensory, so they're learning about their world through touch, through putting everything in their mouth sometimes, unfortunately, building lots of motor skills. So something in the early years that is really, really easy to do is a discovery basket, which is this one on the bottom right. I've actually got my discovery basket here with me today. A discovery basket is really good when they're building those core muscles and starting to sit. So it is just a basket of things to explore. You can have themed discovery baskets. You could do under the sea. My theme of my discovery basket today is what I could find around my office 5 minutes before the webinar started. So I have a stress ball, a measuring cup, I have a rolling pin, a little poppy ball, a baby's bottle, and a scarf. And that's it. That's all that's in the discovery basket, just to explore. And, you know, half the time you can buy kids these amazing toys that cost a lot of money and are very fancy, and they just want to play in the box. So play in the early years doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be fancy. Another great one is a pulling box or a pulling lid. So down here on the bottom left, you can see just kind of like a plastic takeaway lid with some ribbons poked in it and some knots at the end, and that's it. And that's, you know, that's fantastic for fine motor skills, problem solving, and they just pull away. That's another one of my favorite activities in the early years. And then we move up to the toddlers, where we're getting very independent, very, I can do it myself. Yeah, and in those early years, we're getting lots of big motor skills. So you can see this little one on the top, doing some exploring and some climbing, getting outside in those years, playgrounds. Bottom right is actually my nephew, Jack. So he is doing his favorite thing in that photo, exploring the cupboards and just pulling out all the bowls and everything. So in those early years, we're starting to see a bit of pretend play. You know, they're wanting to do a lot of the home-based play scripts. So baby dolls, feeding the baby, putting the baby to bed. They're wanting to do what their parents are doing and what the adults in their lives are doing. So they're wanting to, you know, get involved in the pots and pans, and they're wanting to sweep the floor, even though the broom is like 3 times the height of them. So they're just wanting to do what you're doing in those years. Language development as well is just exploding in those years. So doing things like reading books and singing, narrating and tracking is also a really great skill to use in those years, which we'll touch on a bit later, which is just basically saying what you're seeing. So, you know, you're putting the baby to bed, or, oh, you're taking such good care of that baby. Wow, you're feeling really brave. You're doing lots of climbing. Just tracking along with what's happening and exposing kids to that language. And then we're getting into preschool. So getting really creative, really social. Like I said, this is where we start seeing that conflict resolution and figuring out those social roles. So doing lots of things like pretend play, giving each other roles. You know, you're the baby and I'm the mum and you have to do this. And it gets really interesting in these years. I love these years. You also start to see, I guess it can look a little bit more structured in these years. So you might see starting to get into hobbies or sports or yeah, things that are a bit more structured. But again, they absolutely don't have to be. You know, kids, they can play with pretty much anything as long as it's not dangerous. Like I said, a cardboard box is probably one of my favorite toys. But yeah, in those early years, a lot of the same play activities and skills carry over. They're just developing a bit more as we get on with age. So there are, you know, we only have a short amount of time today, and I could, like I said, talk about play forever, but there are quite a few different theorists and, you know, developmental theorists behind play and what that looks like. So the one that these are probably 2 that we hear a lot about as, you know, early childhood educators and people working with kids. So we've got, what are their first names? Jean Piaget and Mildred Hutton. Yes, got it. So we start off in those early baby years doing the functional play. So play is functional in that they're discovering, they're learning about their world, they're figuring out how their hands work, and they're figuring out, you know, what things feel like. And that is that unoccupied, that solitary play. So that is mostly by themselves. And then we move into those toddler years where we're getting more constructive. We're building with blocks and Play-Doh, and we're experimenting, learning about physics, and that moves into that kind of onlooker play, parallel play, where we're playing, we're watching. Oh, can everyone still hear me? Abby's got a no. Okay. Abby looks concerned. Okay, thumbs up. So that is where we're seeing that spectator play. So kids might be watching other kids play, and they're not quite ready to join in yet. And that's fine. That's really developmentally appropriate for that age. We then are moving into the symbolic and fantasy kind of play. So that's where we'll start seeing that role play coming up in those preschool and kinder years. And that's where we're kind of moving, we're in the parallel play, but we're starting to get a bit associative as well. So we might be playing in the home corner next to each other. We're starting to interact a bit more and to get involved in each other's play. You know, we might be sharing the toys or sharing the resources with each other. And then we move up to games with rules. So we are well into that social and cooperative stage, probably around kinder and school age, where we're assigning roles, we are doing that conflict resolution, and we are, playing by the rules and sometimes testing the rules in that stage as well to see what happens. We also have, I did just pop this one in at the last minute, so play schemas and schematic play. These are all really developmentally appropriate stages that kids go through in their play. So I think the one that causes the most concern is trajectory. And that is the one that my darling nephew is in at the moment. Dropping and throwing, and, you know, when they're sitting on the high chair and they throw something off and then you pick it up and it starts that really fun game. So these are all really appropriate schemas that kids are building in those early years of play. And I really love this picture. It's really simple, but has a lot in it. So in those statistics that Beck showed to us earlier, it was 61% of parents find play boring and 58% want to learn how to play, which as adults, it can be hard to play. It can be hard to find the time as well. Life is so busy. So one way that we can support parents to do that is to encourage special playtime. It's really simple. I said, well, it is simple, but it's hard. Like I said, it can be hard to find the time. So special playtime is choosing a consistent time, you know, whether that's every day, every second day, once a week, as long as it's consistent. Choosing a consistent time to sit down and play together. It can be 10, 20 minutes, you know. We're turning off all distractions, so phones, TVs. You can have a timer, you know, you can have a timer like me and say, okay, this is our special playtime. This is just for us to sit down and play together. And it makes that really special connection. So in special playtime, you want to be using toys that allow for creativity, so they're open-ended. You probably wouldn't sit down and play like a board game, but you know, it all depends on the child and what they're enjoying playing. In special playtime, you're following the child's lead. So it can be really hard. It can be really hard to avoid giving instructions, steering the play. One thing that I really had to unlearn was that interrogation. So what colour is this? What are you doing with that? What noise does the cow make? It can be quite overwhelming to kids when they're playing and someone's, you know, peppering them with questions and they're just wanting to get on with it. But again, don't feel guilty. You know, it's something that has to be learned. It is a skill. So instead of directing and offering solutions, we're coming back to that reflection and tracking skill. So just saying what you're seeing. You can also reflect on feelings. So if there's imaginative play happening, you could reflect on, oh, wow, that person looks really angry, or I wonder how this person is feeling. Oh, wow, they're all the way up the top. They must be feeling really brave. So just reflecting what's happening, saying what you're seeing, and we're really trying to not use it as a teachable moment. You know, it's just a time to let the child lead and enjoy the moment. You might be surprised by what comes up in the play. So the benefits of special playtime, it's going to strengthen that parent-child bond or that carer bond with the child. The power of, you know, not having any distractions, and that tracking really tells children, I see what you're telling me, I understand, and I'm here. just by reflecting back what you're seeing in the play, you're letting them know, I am 100% here with you, and this time is just for us to be together. So it enhances those social and communication skills, it supports emotional expression, builds confidence. It can reduce behavioural difficulties. So making that time to be with each other and to spend one-on-one time together and to give that attention. Some children, they might be seeking that attention in other ways. And by allowing for special playtime, allowing for that connection and giving them that attention, that can sometimes reduce the other ways that they're seeking that attention. And yeah, supporting cognitive development, supporting emotional regulation, just all those good things that we know play does. I can see on my timer I've got about 1 minute left.
You're right, Renee.
Okay, cool. So like Becca said at the start, this is my baby. This is Sometimes Play. So I wrote this with my good friend Nell Harris is the illustrator, and I can see that she's tuned in today. Hey, she is a local illustrator, artist. She's a ray of sunshine. So I wrote this book and she has illustrated it, and it just explores all of the different ways to play. So like I said, play is so broad and it can look so different. So I would love to share my book with everyone here today. Sometimes Play. And I'm probably really tiny on the screen, but I'll still hold it up and I'll still do the teacher thing where I read upside down. Play can be a funny thing. It's a hard one to define. You can play using your body. You can play using your mind. You can play for a short time or play all day long. The one thing about play is there's no way to do it wrong. Sometimes play is happy. I twirl and jump and dance. I show my feelings with my body. I laugh and flap my hands. Sometimes play is careful. I like to take my time. I sort things into groups or put them in a line. Sometimes play is by myself. I'm such good company. I like to craft, explore, and read, or climb a huge big tree. Sometimes play is powerful. I get to be strong and large. I can play out things that worry me and fix them or take charge. This is the page that has a little shout out to play therapy in it. Sometimes play is important. I might play a tricky scene out. This kind of play is helpful for things I can't quite talk about. Sometimes play is messy. It's oozy, goopy slime. Messy play can be fun and can help me calm my mind. Sometimes play is busy with goals and lines to stay between. This play takes lots of thinking, but I like to be in a team. Sometimes play is big. It sprawls from wall to wall. Sometimes play is little and doesn't need much space at all. Sometimes play is free. It's completely up to me. I can be a Wild West astronaut or whatever I want to be. Sometimes play is cozy. It's a warm blanket house. I'm safe with someone special. I'm as snuggly as a mouse. So what exactly is play? You'll know it when you see. It's okay for play to be different for you than it is for me. How do you like to play? There's so many different ways. The only thing to remember is there's no wrong way to play. That's the end. And I do just have one more little shout out to Nell because it's her birthday today. So happy birthday to Nell.
Oh, happy birthday.
And that is it. Thank you so much. Those are just my different contact details. Got the 2 QRs there. So one is just for Grow for my therapy website, and then the other is for Sometimes Play.
Thank you, Renee.
No worries. Thank you so much.
It's so nice to have you join us and to, provide a range of perspectives in relation to play. And I think dive into the world of play with the lens of a child. And I think even your delivery of your story also gives us a bit of that as well. So very powerful. And I feel that there's a little bit there that we can definitely take with us in relation to a strategy in regards to special playtime and, using that strategy to encourage families to dedicate that window of time and take away any of those distractions and offer some guidance for that. This is an opportunity for some questions to come through. I can see lots of people celebrating your reading, so well done for reading such a
You.
doing such a great job to deliver your beautiful book. There have been two questions that have come through that I'll quickly just pop through. But if there are any thoughts or questions that you want to pop through, we'll do our best to get to some of those now, and if not, we'll collate them and we can see what either the webinar time brings or after the webinar to respond to those. Belinda asked, what do you suggest for 4-year-olds that always take on role as a dog or a baby and they wait to be directed from their friends? What would you suggest in those types of situations with those roles?
It's
There's a bit of a leadership, isn't there?
It sounds like, without getting too without therapizing too much, wanting that direction and wanting that structure, wanting to be told, what to do. I'm wondering if maybe some activities to build that self-esteem and that self-confidence of, I can make decisions for myself and I can choose what to do. But specific activities.
Well, it might even just be, I feel like in that, suggesting, in those situations where there might be children commonly, being those characters of a dog or a baby, and then they're kind of waiting to be directed is, I feel sometimes our role, is needed in this situation a little bit as well, isn't it? And I'm not sure if you agree, Renee, but it is about us being present in those moments and perhaps offering some of that guidance with what you've noticed and how we could flip those roles and model perhaps that play by being there to play alongside with the group and having I suppose, a role yourself. Whether, that's something that, perhaps you were thinking, Renee, but I know in, my previous experience and there are, some really strong characters and leaders in play sometimes, and we need to support others to be that role as well. And it is about us guiding that and offering those suggestions too, and being there to play. Yeah.
Whether that maybe that child does have quite a strong player in their home. Maybe there's an older sibling that's directing the play and they're feeling a bit lost without them. That might be how they're is taking direction. If this was in a therapy setting, I might reflect kind of what that play is expressing. So I might reflect something like, oh, you're feeling a little bit like, feeling a little bit lost. You want me to tell you what to do? Just reflecting back to them how they're feeling and putting that out into the open that they might, expand on that a bit further.
Yeah, definitely. So lots of observations and taking a lot of information in that tells us a little bit about, why and where that roles come from as well. Another question's come through from Catherine in relation to play, and it says, are there any good simple resources for families with these tips for doing the special play time? So any types of resources there that might help with that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. If you Google special playtime, so I think originally it might have been Gary Landreth. It is a form of child-parent relationship therapy. So if you Google special playtime, there are some really great just 1 or 2 page PDFs that you can print off and give to parents, kind of outlining how to do it, how to kind of set the stage, what kind of toys to use. I'm just scavenged through my cupboard. I think I did have a document that I can maybe send to you.
You can share it on, Renee, and we can even pop it alongside.
Yeah, so just a little special playtime at home. I actually created this when I went on a holiday. So I was just giving parents some resources about how to keep playing at home. So absolutely, I can put that one forward.
Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah, we can do that and we can set that aside, the slides as well. So thank you. Well, at the minute, all I can see is lots of applause, Renee, in relation
Thank you.
to you and your work and your book as well. So I'm taking that as a really strong signal in relation to people who are joining in, that there's a lot that people perhaps are going to be taking on and moving forward with. And thank you once again for sharing your expertise, your amazing work with young children and families. And again, stick around. And if there are any more questions, we might prompt some more through to you as well, Renee, later on. So
Awesome.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. Well, thank you for those people who had some questions. And if anything comes to mind that you're sitting on, please pop it in the chat. We're more than happy to hear you out and support you to have your questions answered. I'd like to move on now and introduce our second guest speaker for today. Jason Tindall has been integral to Nature Play SA since its inception, driving the Nature Play movement in South Australia. And Jason has a background in conservation management, community development and education, and he's dedicated to fostering relationships between communities and the natural environment to support wellbeing. In 2021, Jason was awarded a Certificate of Commendation for Education engagement as part of the inaugural Peltzer Prize. Jason's a storyteller and loves listening to the stories and wisdom of Aboriginal peoples as he connects with country. He's passionate about conservation, spending time outdoors with his two girls and finding rare and precious plants and animals. Also, Jason, I've learned a lot about your amazing skills to take photographs. So that's something else that I've learned so much, even just about connecting with you for this webinar today. You have a definite talent there. So welcome, Jason. We look forward to hearing all about the wonderful world of play and nature.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Renee. I always enjoy hearing you talk, Renee. I always learn something else. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and enthusiasm and passion. And thanks to the Raising Literacy team, and the Words Grow Minds campaign is such a beautiful one. I mean, it's on the buses and it's everywhere, but the meaning of it is a really important one. And it's enabled us to be here today and enabled us to create this sort of narrative. So it's a wonderful opportunity. So yes, I'm Jason from Nature Play. Nature Play SA is a not-for-profit organisation. We were established in 2014, and our vision at the time, the reason that the government established us as a not-for-profit, was to get more kids outside and to get them off screens. That was the assignment, I guess, to start with. And a lot of people said, isn't it a bit strange that you've had to kind of come up with this organisation to help kids play outside? And we thought, yeah, actually it is. It is a bit strange. And then we were asked, where do you want to be in 5 years? And all of us, there was like 2 of us at the time, but anyway, all of us said, we shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be needed in 5 years' time, because we should see lots of children getting back outside. Now we're 10 years on. It's our 10th year this year. And it's more important now than ever. It's more important now than ever to get our children outside, to get our children not so much off screens, but to get them to have more balance in their lives. Because I'm never going to say things about, I'm always going to talk about balance. So I'm excited to take you through many, many different things today. Like Renee, I could talk for days on end about this stuff. So I've got 3 hours worth of content and I've shoved it in to about 27 minutes. So let's see how we go with that one. So firstly, I'm coming from a beautiful place called Wuttunga Botanic Gardens. It's really important to me that I acknowledge Wurrungaana country, but also acknowledge the elders and the artists that I've had the privilege to work with, the children, those who I've walked side by side with, and those who I haven't yet, and acknowledge the ancestors and acknowledge their elders past and present. And it's every time I talk about that, I feel it. I feel the energy of country, and I feel the gratitude of having to be in a position where I can work with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. So when I work with adults, children, professionals, everybody, I always ask this question. And the question is, where and how did you play as a child? I ask that question because it gets us thinking. It gets us thinking about what our childhood looked like. It gets us thinking about where we went, who we went with, were there any adults there? Did we do anything that we would consider risky by today's standards? And often I get a lot of interesting stories when I say that. Sometimes I feel like it was a completely different era. And in some respects, it is indeed, because the next question that I ask is, has childhood changed? Has it changed from 20, 30, 40 years ago? A lot of the things that I have heard in the past is about children coming home when the streetlights come on. It's a very common thing now. I often hear, and a whole range of different other stories. So I hear these stories, and often people light up and they tell me all about their time they went down the creek, or the time they did something that was risky. And then I ask another question, and that question is, in 20 years' time, what will our children recall as their childhood memories? What are children doing today that in 20, 30 years' time they're going to look back on? Because what a lot of the research tells us is, in times of stress and anxiety, we look back to those memories that we have in our lives. And a real part of play is joy. And joy helps us put things deep in our memory that we can draw back on. So there's a lovely man working in the UK by the name of Tim Gill. And Tim Gill in 2011 showed me this map. Now, nobody needs to look really closely at it because I'm going to explain it to you. But when he showed me this map, everything fell into place. It was before I had any children. So he showed me this map and it all fell into place to me. So what it is basically we have a young fella by the name of Ed, and he's 8 years old. And this is showing here the generations before him of his family. So we're going to go back 100 years to 1919 to Ed's great-grandfather. So that big kind of triangle-looking thing in the middle, that really large area, I'm calling it a triangle, but it's got round sides. That was his play range, his great-grandfather's play range at age 8. It was about 6 miles. So this is UK-based, 6 miles. That's how far he would go. That's how far he would roam. And then we look at Ed's grandfather, Jack, on the left, that circle on the kind of middle left. Could be right, not quite sure how you're looking at your screens, but his grandfather, Jack, in 1950 was able to walk about a mile at age 8. And then we look at his mother, Vicky, in 1979, which is about half a mile. And then we go to Ed. So today at age 8, I say today, it was 2011, he could walk to the end of his street. But today it's maybe to the letterbox and back. We don't often get children roaming like they used to. And for me, when I look at this, I think, okay, wherever your play range was, if you had a big backyard, if you did go as far as his great-grandfather did, or whatever that was, what did you do? What sort of activities did you do together? As kids, what did you do? And a lot of the common things that I get are things like, we climb trees, and we climb trees. I'm like, great. So when we look at tree climbing, and I say, well, let's make a quick list of all the benefits of tree climbing. So tree climbing has lots and lots of benefits, as we know, for improved gross motor skills. It's around risk, and Renee alluded that I will talk about risk, which I'm now going to talk about risk in more detail. We talk about tree climbing and think, what else did we do? So some of the other things that a lot of us did as kids were cubby building or fort building. We built a lot of stuff with friends. And the one thing we didn't have, the kids have today, is an adult watching us making our decisions. So we were the ones who were making decisions. We were the ones who were determining whether something was risky, or at least trying something. Now, I am talking about the older cohort of children at the moment, but I'm going to bring that back to the young ones. So then we say, we say another one, for example, it would be puddle jumping. Obviously, that's a bit younger, but I remember as a kid just trying the biggest puddles I can. I was with my friends and I would just go for it. And I would just be feeling water all over me and a whole range of things. So the reason that I highlight these and the benefits is, if we think about when we were kids and say we come up with 10 different activities that we did as kids in our play range, and we made up a list of all of the benefits, that list of benefits would be really, really long. So all of these lists of benefits of all of the play that we did. And then I flick back to the map. I think, okay, so if a play range of a child has shrunk shrunk to the point where Ed now is, where do children get those benefits? And this is where the definition of nature play comes into it, because they get their benefits from a mosaic of experiences. So it's home, it's school, it's kindy, it's down the park. But what we have to recognise, and I pick up the point that Renee made and that Cole made, is that play is so vitally important, because all of those developmental benefits that I showed, that's what the research has told us. So now we're in a place where we'll never go back to what it was. We won't go back to children roaming the streets and coming home when street lights come on and all those sorts of things. But what we do have is we have the knowledge that all of these benefits can happen in today's context. And that's what nature play is. So I can tell you a definition about nature play around, it's unstructured, open-ended play outdoors, but it's very contextual. It really depends on your life circumstances, on where you're from. But we do know that if we mimic those types of tree climbing and puddle jumping and building things and imaginary play, if we mimic those in today's context, then we can start to hone in on what we can do as a family, as an education site. And they're the things I want to take you through is, what does that type of play look like in today's context? So that's the question, is how do we nature play today, given that it's so different to what it was? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through two different types of play, which Renee talked about, but I'm going to give them context in terms of nature. So the first one is physical play. It's running, jumping, climbing, pushing, pulling, all of those sorts of things. And Renee did such a good job of talking about the types of play. And the way that I see time in nature is it enriches every aspect of play. It enriches every aspect of development when it's outside, and it's complementary to other forms of play, whether that's playing loose parts inside or playing loose parts outside. And the same can be said for physical play. So the sorts of examples around physical play, things like cubby building, tree climbing, rock hopping, log walking, a range of different things. Now, a lot of this falls into that category of risk. And the first thing I would say about risk is there is risk and there is a hazard, and they're very, very different things. So, for example, if we're going to build a structure from a pile of wood, for example, we've looked at the wood, it's great. There's no issues that we're seeing. The risk is that it may build something, it may fall on them, they may get a splinter. That's the risk. But the hazard is if that wood has nails in it, that's a hazard, and we must remove it. So it's very different from a risk to a hazard. That's the sort of language that we use, because then it really says, well, when we're looking at risk, there's two types of risk. There's a risk that we can see, a physical risk that we see and perceive. We say, oh, I can see my child potentially falling out of that tree. So therefore, I'm going to say, actually, no, let's not do that. The other risk is a risk that we don't see. And that risk is, what is our child missing out on by not climbing that tree? So I'll give you an example. I was with some children and there was a range of different ages. In fact, it was on a family trip, and I was the designated nature play man. So I took the kids off with me, and we got to a big tree, and one of the children said to me, "Hey, can I climb this tree?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, no worries." And they went to climb it, and they sort of went sort of 2 steps up, and it was a diagonal tree, like 2 steps up. And I actually, no, I can't do this. I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. I said, "That's no worries, no problem at all." And then my daughter she's quite the gazelle. So she took her shoes off and up she went. She went up the tree, up to the top. And so the child was watching on. He was watching on, and that's a very important thing for kids to do, is to actually watch other children engage in play. So he's watching her grow up, and he says, "Oh, can I have another go?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So he took his shoes off and slowly started to climb up. Got to the point where he's a little bit scared again. I supported him to get down, and then he went a little bit higher, and he got to the top. And how do you think he felt getting to the top of that? He was like, "Oh, look at me. I did it. I did it." That right there is more than just us seeing a child climb a tree. That there is so fundamentally important for that child's self-belief that they actually did something. And even more important, there was a trusting adult that gave them the time and the space to do it. So if I had said, actually, no, we're not climbing trees, the risk is he wouldn't have felt that feeling. And we want our children to have lots of windows of that type of feeling, because we're headed into a future where we have anxiety, depression, sedentary behavior, all of these things sky high in children. So when we get opportunities for them to feel that, and that's always associated with risk. The other thing about risk is it's not our perception of risk, it's what a child sees as a risk. So I remember leaping over this big canyon as a child. I'd take a big run up and I would leap and jump. And I went back there as a kid and it was probably about 40 centimeters. It wasn't very wide at all, but as a child, I perceived that as a risk and I still had that feeling of, I did this. So for me, when we're talking about risk, those are really important conversations to have. When we're talking about things like rock hopping, some of the things that I do, and I've done this with my girls since they were almost able to walk, is that we would find a rock, and it could be a log, could be something else, and I'd say, I'm going to set a rock challenge. And my rock challenge would be, I would jump from one rock to another, very small rocks, maybe 20 centimeters apart. And that's my challenge. And my daughters were like, oh, okay, I'm going to try this. And I'd hold my hand and I'd jump, a big jump, those big kind of bend the knees and not go very far jumps. So big jump. And then slowly over time, build their confidence to start to jump further rocks and other rocks. And when children are doing that, when they're taking control of their play and they're assessing their risk, what that does is it translates to when they're older, they make better decisions. And those decisions may be the difference between when they're a teenager and when they're faced with peer pressure. So it's so important at a young age that children are exposed to physical activity through nature that enables them to take risks. So the other type of play is sensory play. And sensory play is, for me, we're sensory beings. Everywhere we go, we're engaged in some type of sensory play. And the sorts of things that I often talk about with sensory play is things like mud. And I get a lot of people saying, okay, well, I don't like mess, or it's too dirty, the kids get too dirty. And that tends to be the barrier. And the thing that I often say for that is, okay, so you don't like mess, mud's, it's too dirty. Okay, so you just transform yourself into a child quickly. And I say to you, do you want to play in the mud? How do you feel? It's like, yeah, actually, it excites me as a child to get into the mud. I say, okay, we need to get to the balance, because what we're doing there is we're trying to control the play based on our own preferences. So and we have to accept that sometimes for us, it is hard. It is hard as parents and educators to find that line, but it's important to see from the child's perspective, just where we can meet them halfway. Because if we dive into the research, mud and sensory play, there's so many research papers on it. But also I have encountered a lot of scenarios where there might be some sensory issues with mud. So some of the alternatives I've given is you'll see ice flowers on the right there. That was some things that I made with my daughters. And the idea is that we get muffin trays, we fill them with water, we fill them with flowers that we picked in the garden, and we freeze them. And then we pop them out and then we can crush them, and they're cold and they're warm. It's a great thing to do in summer. And also it doesn't have that element of mess when it comes to mud. So there's various ways that we can do that and introduce that. Bare feet play is such a vital one. A lot of people, in their school environment or kinder environment, there's no bare feet, and at home there's no bare feet. And for me, when we look at the feet compared to the hands, they have thousands and thousands of nerve endings. So if you have shoes on all the time, it's equivalent to as if we had gloves on all the time. We have to have those sensory inputs coming through, and it starts at a very young age. And there's lots of things around spatial awareness and coordination that are really beneficial with bare feet. But going back to the risk discussion, in my backyard, every second summer, our big red gum flowers. It flowers so much that it just attracts all the bees in the world. For some reason, they come in their thousands. We can hear them in the morning buzzing, and they get so happy with pollen that they drop to the ground, and the ground is just littered with bees. That, for me, is a hazard. And I say that the benefit is not worth the risk, so therefore we're not going bare feet in that period of time. So there are certain things that, from our context, that we can do, that we can make those decisions, but it's really recognizing just how important those elements are for children. And loose parts is something that you may have all been familiar with, but basically the best way I can describe that is if I have a truck, then the affordances of that truck. And affordance theory is something, if you're not familiar with, it'd be a great one to look up, but basically the different ways that something can be used. If I had a truck, it can drive, it can fly, it can, like I say, fly, it can be projectile across the roof, those sorts of things. But there's lots of great imaginative potential in that. However, if I want to extend that and I go outside and I have a stick, I'm just showing you a stick. If you're on your phone, you'll hardly see what I'm holding, but I'm holding a stick. And I often say to people, okay, I've got a stick, what am I? Usually the first answer I get is you're a man with a stick. That's generally the answer I get. But then we dive deeper. Okay, what could I be? I could be a fairy, I could be a pirate, I could be anything I want to be. So say you are a pirate, and then I say to people, well, how are you talking if you're a pirate? And we're talking like, we're articulating, we're becoming part of that story, part of that narrative, and it's a really special thing. But then it can quickly change to something else. I could be a wizard, or I could be a witch, I could be whatever it is, and then the vocabulary and the speech changes. So when we've got open-ended items and loose parts, it provides that opportunity to play in that way. And sometimes we've found that children have spent a lot of time indoors, and they get outside, they're not quite sure what to do. And I'll pick up Renee's point where she said it's so important we don't direct or control play. From my perspective, we're a play observer or a play participant. So we are either invited in, and if we're invited into play, then we become a participant. So we don't go, that's great, excellent, off we go. We get involved in that play. And if we're a play observer, what that means, and again, Renee said it beautifully, is we don't disturb children during their play. So what I mean by that is if you're working, if you're creating, and you've hit that zone of, oh, I'm really productive here, and someone comes over your shoulder and they say, hey, what are you doing there? You kind of get a bit, you just broke my concentration. When children are playing, they're living in these rich narratives. And if we can step back and not get involved, then they're controlling that narrative. And that becomes a beautiful thing. And afterwards, we can ask them, hey, what were you up to? And I've seen countless examples of children playing that way, not being disturbed by the educators, and it was challenging. And then having calls from educators say, hey, those children now, they're writing and they haven't stopped. They're just writing pages and pages. And they don't usually write too much, but they're trying to write. And they said they're writing all about the play. They're writing all about what they were doing. So when we see research that says time in nature and nature play flows onto academic results, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about giving children incentive, that magic that someone mentioned in the comments, that incentive to want to go, I need to tell this and I need to articulate this, and I'm going to love writing this story or talking this story or being excited. So for me, when we look at loose parts, that's a really important part of looking at why that's valuable. So what I want to do now is I want to tell you a story that ties all this together. And this story, some of you may recognize when I say all was quiet in the deep dark wood. You may know that or you may not, but it is a reference to my first daughter's favorite book. And her favorite book was The Gruffalo. And we used to read it all the time. And for the most part, we would be reading it outside. And I say that because this idea of nature play isn't just about a traditional sense of playing outside. It's about spending time outside doing things, because I feel like that goes to the culture of your family, that goes to your pedagogy, your curriculum, is spending that time outside. So this was probably our third copy of The Gruffalo, because it was loved so much. But we used to sit outside and read, and we had a small backyard, and so we'd set things up like a picnic rug, other bits and pieces, and I'd also had a sensory station. A lot of people call it a mud kitchen, but basically, this is my daughter creating. She used to create a lot, and when we first got our mud kitchen, and I say mud kitchen, it can be as simple as a bench. And you can go spend $10 at the op shop to get pots and pans, and you can pick anything that you eat, from mint and basil, lavender, those sorts of things, and put them together and children will create and get all of those sensory developmental benefits. So when we first did it, she sort of tinkered about for maybe 5 minutes and then just, actually, Dad, I just want you to be close to me. Can you kind of just, can you do this with me? And I do it a little while and then I take a step back and then I would just tinker around myself and other things like sweep the backyard or something like that. And then it turned into 10 minutes of her before she needed me to come into play. And then over time, it turned into 1 or 2 hours of sustained play where I wasn't part of it. And that's where I became that play observer. My backyard was very clean by the end of it. So I would, and she'd be creating lots of things and she would do it bare feet. Again, it's a really important thing for me to stipulate. It's just how important that is. And what we would do when we did our sensory or our potions or our mud pies is we would go for a walk through the neighborhood. So she'd have her basket, I'd have mine, and off we went. And that's my lovely schnauzer in the background with the side pose. But we would then walk the neighborhood, and our rule was we're not going into people's yards. As long as it's hanging over the fence, then that's okay. But also if our backyard was flowering and full, we would do that too. But there's something special about going out into your neighborhood. There's something special about going and collecting things together, coming back and creating things. So then we came back from a long session, collecting bits and pieces. And for those of you who might go, I don't know what to collect, I've just put a list up of certain things that a lot of us know what they are that you can use. So lavender, rosemary, geranium, whole range of things that when you get the slide deck, you'll be able to look at if you're not familiar with. So we use those things because then it doesn't really matter if things go in mouths and stuff like that. So, and then she started creating. So she loved having her bowls and her bits and pieces, and she'd arrange things from all of our collections. And I'm just in the backyard. Often, clearly you can see I would have my camera with me because that has made it much easier for me to be a play observer when I've got my camera. And so there we are. She's creating things, and then she calls me over, and she said, "Dad, come." So I was like, oh, great. What have we got? I love hearing the creations. And she looked at me and she held this beautiful creation up to me. And she goes, Dad, I made some gragra stew. And this gragra stew, graga was the way that she said gruffalo. So she made this beautiful gruffalo stew. And then she'd put it at the door at the backyard. And then she'd race up in the morning and it'd be messed up because I was the gruffalo for that day. She'd mess it up. She's the gruffalo, he's eating my stew. And she did it for about a week. And part of us as well, part of the way that we do things, I encourage other families is to also go beyond the backyard, is to take children, no matter how young they are, to other places, to natural places. And the sort of places that we go, one of our favorite places to go is the forest. We go to this forest a lot. And I remember the first time we went to a forest, my first order, she was a bit like, oh, this is a bit scary, because think about the noise of the wind and these big figures just waving through I think it's beautiful and mindful, but over time, it became a very special place to her. So we got there one day and she got out the car and she's feeling really confident and she starts trekking through the forest. Clearly, she was on a mission and I had no idea what she was going to. And as she was trekking, when I talk about physical play, you can see there's no path here. And it's like this little obstacle that she's trying to climb and go and move. And you can imagine the smell of all the pine needles coming up from the ground. It's very, very sensory. And then she'd heard something and she turned and she was just still. And this is little Flopsy here, little bunny that's still with us today. My daughter is now 9. So this was probably 6 years ago, maybe, yeah, it's about 6 years ago. She heard something. And off she went again. So she's walking through with this bunny. And finally, she gets to a place. And she sits down. And she goes, Dad, Gragra. She's like, Gragra's out there. And then I'd have a pine cone in my hand. I kind of just throw it to the side. And she'd hear it. She'd go, Gragra. And she sat here for about 10 minutes, just sitting. And it's one of the most beautiful moments that I'll ever remember, because when you look into it, how often do children get this time where the world is just quiet, where they are just existing in a space? Now, I tried really hard to stay still so my footprints through the forest didn't interrupt this. And for me, when we're talking about play, and I'll go back to that definition of play, it's much more of a thread that that weaves through our family about what we do, from outside, doing things outside, to playing outside, to going beyond. And not that long ago, so this, like I said, this was 6 years ago, and this is still known as the Gruffalo's Forest, is I took my other daughter there. This is my other daughter sitting there in the same spot, doing the same thing in the Gruffalo Forest. So in fact, I have to finish on this. All was quiet in the deep dark wood, because that's that feeling of slowing down and being present. That's what I was feeling, and that's what you want to feel in childhood too. Sometimes it can be go, 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 and all these expectations and other things going on. It's finding these quiet pockets of time. And I believe it was born from a very young age, doing all of these elements that are rich in play, especially in that nature context. So as I conclude, because I too am trying to stick to time, is the way that I see childhood is like a nest. So this nest it's full of love and safety. That's what's inside the nest, but it's created from all of the beautiful experiences that children have, from experiences with their friends, with their loved ones, but also their play experiences. How rich that is to create the childhood that we want them to have. And I think if we look at the different elements of play, we look at who we are, how we're motivated as parents, as educators, to bring the best experiences to our children's lives. And we're going to have this beautiful nest of childhood, because I feel like I was looking at that photo last night of my daughter in the forest, and there was this part of me that was both grateful, but also, where did time go? Because they grow up so fast. And I'm never going to look back and say, I regret spending so much time outside. Because as Richard Louv says, children don't remember the best day of television. And they don't. So for me, I still want to do more, but I have to recognize that we're all where we're at, and we do the best we can. So as I conclude, one, I want to say thank you. I want to give our resources a plug. There's lots of resources online, lists and provocations and posters that can support families and educators in just getting more time outside. I think that's really important from some of the research and the polls and those sorts of things around parent attitudes, is that we really got to find a way to excite parents, because children will play wherever they go. And our job is to provide the atmosphere where they can truly thrive. So with that, I want to say thank you. Please connect with us on our Facebook, our Instagram, and as a not-for-profit, we always appreciate people dropping us a line. But also it's important for me to acknowledge our funding partners as well as a not-for-profit. We've got Green Adelaide and the Department for Education are really important here in South Australia to support us to be able to do some amazing work across events and education. And we have a whole range of other collaborators and partners. So just want to spread that love, because everything that we do is made possible through all of that support. And also my team is an incredibly passionate one. As you can see, I think I've gone over time by about a minute, but I would definitely love to keep talking, but I won't. I just want to say thank you. And the fact that you're here on the webinar is just a wonderful sign of commitment of your own professional learning and development. And it's been a real pleasure to share this with you. So thank you.
Oh, Jason, thank you. I'm actually feeling quite emotional. Like, you really took me on a personal story, I think, as well. And I can see even Liz, I think she's feeling a little bit the same, that she's popped her comment in the chat. And I think we all play a role in that, don't we, in this story, as early childhood professionals or parents. I'm a parent myself, and I know that your story resonates, I think, as a parent too. So we all do play a huge part. And I think you've made such a great point about we hold such special memories, and those memories are in nature. I was just reflecting on thinking about my memories, and I think, wow, yes, you're on the money there, Jason, because it's 100% true. I think that, even that huge statement at the very beginning, about in 20 years' time, for all children recall as their childhood memories, I think we need to always have that in the back of our minds in the decisions that we make and the way that we work. And thank you for giving us that opportunity to really reflect on our own selves or on our own professional work in this webinar today. So yeah, we're so appreciative of your time, and Nature Play SA has been a huge part of Words Grow Minds as well. So thank you. There is a small moment for questions, and again, if we go over a little bit, I think we're okay, because I didn't want to leave that presentation at all or take any time from that. So there, you did hit on it really well, Jason, in regards to the time outside, and it doesn't matter about the age and stages. It's about being there and the things that you can do, and that you can do anything outside. It is about having that balance and meeting children halfway, even if we have other personal preferences sometimes as well. So if there are any questions that you are wanting to ask Jason, feel free to pop it in the chat. We are more than happy to take those on and hear those. I always think about, just a quick piece is about, this campaign is based on the early years, and I think about babies. And I mentioned in our conversation, when we first met, about, the opportunity of these early years and how it's foundational from birth, and that, you made a strong point, like I said, about being outside and having the time to do things. And Jason, I'd love to hear, in relation to babies, what does it look like? What does Nature Play look like for babies? Can you give us a brief little snippet?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question too, because I remember
Yeah,
lessons and thinking almost couldn't wait to get to the good stuff almost.
you do. Yeah.
Of climbing and puddles. But I go to the sensory side of things. So I remember that my first one, for the first 12 weeks, she did a lot of crying, a lot of crying. And I would take her outside, and Mum would take her outside too, take her outside and kind of do the bounce, which I could occasionally find myself still doing now, do the bounce. And I kind of tilted to look at the trees, and the wind would just be blowing the leaves, and there would be an element of calmness there. Not everything didn't go quiet, of course, but I felt it. I felt that there was that fascination of the patterns and the lights, and that is so important, not just from a nature play perspective, but from a developmental perspective around vision and around understanding the world. Those sort of things are so important. I also, from a young age, had different. I'm just turning around to get some things out of my collection here. Is I've always had these little loose parts that are big enough not to chew, but are like pine cones, and they're squishy and they make sounds. Autumn leaves do, and even after rain, taking bubbers outside after rain and having that smell. Those sorts of things cannot be underestimated about how important they are. Again, it's going outside, and over time, I still remember the first time my daughters felt rain on their faces, and being in the rain is so important. And also remember the first time they started to walk barefoot on cold surfaces and rough surfaces. It's very surprising, all of this input coming in. So I think from a young age, it's about being outside, but recognizing that those sensory elements are so important. And as they get older, I think if we're continually learning ourselves, and then we will find different ways to incorporate it. And there are some wonderful play groups out there. There's some wonderful kindergartens, and they're advocating really strongly for not only nature play, but to understand play even deeper.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you. It's nice to have that small little addition there, and hear your thoughts about that, that important and crucial age as well, because that's where it can start, doesn't it? Those attitudes in relation to nature, and what nature does bring for our well-being as well. And it's about us slowing down and making time for these moments, and going back into a child's world. And we overlook even just what a breeze could feel like on our faces, because we do it, we know it. But for children who are learning about these first moments, we need to make contact with that, and make sure that children have those opportunities. So thank you for touching on that, Jason. That's amazing. A lot of people are in the chat, and they're certainly on your side, and even I can just hear you. She's just shared about going outside to watch birds, being present in that, and just listening and taking in all of that sensory opportunity, which is lovely to hear your reflection there too. I'm aware of time, and I know time's precious for all of us. So I'm going to move forward now. And thank you once again, Jason, and being part of this webinar today. I will leave this directory of organisations and for you to have a look at, and really it's a way. This is not an exhaustive or all of the organisations that advocate and provide opportunities and support for families in play and for yourselves as professionals. And you're welcome to add some more in the chat that we can definitely add to the list, but this will be a list that you can click on and connect to when the slides become available as well. Also important to note, Early Childhood Australia have a really strong statement on play, which really gives us some real good principles and guidance for our practice, and a bit of that backbone as to the why and what this should be looking like in our professions. So yeah, click on that and have a look too. That really does provide some guidance too. Moving forward to this webinar is an additional layer to our professional learning opportunity, and this professional learning course is free. There is a module on play, so this is an added piece to the module content, and it is obviously adding depth to what this module does provide. And if you have clicked on and connected with our professional learning already, that's amazing. But if you haven't, or you know of people that might want to know this, send the link on. And also families too. If you're interested in this, there is no ways that you cannot also click on this. We're inviting you to take part in this learning as well. So get on board, go onto our website, click those modules that you want to know about and learn more about, and you'll also get a certificate which shares just how you are progressing in your professional learning as well. Well, as we're wrapping up, webinar 4 on play, we are also giving you some information in regards to our plans for our next webinar. Webinar 5 is on read, which is super exciting, and that one is going to be delivered October 29th, again, same time, 11 till 12:30 p.m. A link here is to reserve a spot as well, and I can say we're really fortunate to have key presenters Ali O'Brien, who is the publishing director of Little Book Press here, as well as Ali Durham, who is the local South Australian illustrator and author, and Diane Krieg, who is the state coordinator of Paint the Town Read in South Australia as well. So we've got some really great content that we are lining up for you, and reserve yourself a spot, and we look forward to seeing you come on board for our next webinar on read and all things read. I want to say a really big thank you to you all for coming into our webinar and participating in and hearing your comments and your questions and your suggestions. It really does add value to this opportunity today. It's been a really great opportunity for us to learn, to connect, and thank you once again to Renee and to Jason, who have just been such added members to this webinar, and your expertise. You've really truly immersed us in all things play. You've given us a huge range of perspective in relation to play. I feel inspired, and I'm not sure about all of you, but I feel that way from hearing your expert advice and your story shared today. So your feedback is really important to us, and I'll leave this slide up as I know some of you will be starting to log on off to continue your busy days. But if your feedback is really important, and this helps us to grow and build our webinar opportunities and professional development and learning opportunities here. So please click on, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Also, here are some links to stay connected. Words Grow Minds is always sharing such wonderful information to families that you can access on the website and also through our Facebook and Instagram links. There's also opportunities for you to learn about all of the community events that are also unfolding. There's a lot of information that we're sharing that's continuing to be updated. So to keep yourself, keep that open and always revisit our website as well. So we look forward to seeing you and having you come back in October, on the 29th of October again. And once again, thank you very much for coming on into this webinar this morning, and stay tuned and see you soon. Thanks again.